and welcome to today's Q&A. Thank you again for sending in so many great topics. I'm especially excited about this one today, which deals with the question of learning other styles of music or even learning other techniques such as extended techniques and how that benefits us as flute players and our ability to approach standard repertoire, standard techniques. So the two questions that I'll combine for today's session are, in what way can using extended techniques in modern flute music help our playing overall? And the second question is, how does learning other styles help your flute playing ability? I'll focus mostly in the session on the question regarding extended techniques. So let's start with the question, what are they? Get a pen and paper ready for this earth-shattering definition. What are extended techniques? Extended techniques are making sounds with the flute. In fact, most of us started using these techniques as beginners. We just didn't know they were extended techniques. Take Aeolian or air sounds, for example. Or how about that thing you did in 5th grade when the band director was working with the trumpet section and you were trying to get some practicing in? I mean, how exactly are these techniques different from non-extended techniques or standard flute playing techniques? Let's break it down. Do you use your fingers in extended techniques? Yes. Do you use your air in extended techniques? Yes. Do you use your oral cavity or your resonance cavity or your tongue in extended techniques? How about vibrato or phrasing or articulation? All of those are used in extended techniques. Do extended techniques use written notation that appear on the score? So in most ways, these techniques are not different from other techniques used in flute playing. They're just on a different spectrum of the sound continuum that composers are using or that we're using as artists when we interpret flute music. They basically use the same sound producing mechanisms, but in a different way. And while the notation for extended techniques is somewhat new and actually still developing, there is a form of notation. And since they've become a recent, say since 1936, fascination of flutists and composers, the sounds are being explored, discovered, developed, and used more in music that is now being written for the flute. So really all extended techniques are color extensions to our sound palette. They're color extensions to the sound palette that composers are using. They're color extensions and texture extensions that we as artists can also implement. So let's take a look at why extended techniques are treated the way they are. First of all, how are they treated? Well, in my personal experience as a young student and a young musician, I viewed extended techniques and modern music as this whole separate language. It was an optional language. It was like, do you want to take French? Do you want to take Spanish in school? This is an optional course. So I kind of viewed modern music, extended techniques as something that was optional and something that was very separate from just standard regular flute playing. Extended techniques are basically treated like another language. They are not considered the mother tongue of flute playing. However, that needs to change. That is changing, and it's a very exciting thing. Extended techniques should be really no different than standard techniques. It should all just be flute playing technique. Because of this, it's taught late if it's taught at all, and it kind of has a stigma like it must be really hard if you're not supposed to be learning it right now, or it must be different or optional or something that's too challenging for me to tackle right now because I haven't been taught it and I've been studying flute for 15 years. Or there's an idea that fundamental or standard flute playing techniques need to be solid first before a teacher initiates instruction on extended techniques. And this really reflects a very linear approach to learning. My perspective is that if your 8-year-old student is struggling to get a really good fundamental sound on the flute, but they can move their fingers, why not teach them to beatbox Mary Had a Little Lamb? I mean, if you can sneeze, you can do extended techniques. Ha, ha, ha. If you can click your tongue, you can do extended techniques. If you can spit a watermelon seed across the lawn, you can do extended techniques. If you can sing, you can do extended techniques. If you can blow air out of your body forcefully, you can do extended techniques. How about howling like a ghost? Or sounding like the old plumbing in your house. So you too can do extended techniques, right? I mean, what 8-year-old or what 50-year-old wouldn't want to make sounds like that on the flute? Another consideration for why extended techniques are sort of kept in a separate category is that historically, it may be that our teachers and our grand teachers and our great grand teachers weren't taught these techniques because, hey, they weren't around and they weren't active in learning the repertoire that's now using those techniques. If you're in this category as a student or a teacher, I encourage you to just jump right in. There are so many great YouTube tutorials, so many amazing books that explain these techniques, repertoire and etudes that introduce these techniques, online lessons. You can hit me up for an online lesson on extended techniques if you want, seminars, workshops, lots going on in the field of extended techniques with many opportunities for learning them no matter what stage of the game you're in. Another consideration is that there were fewer pieces using these techniques at one time, but that's no longer the case. There are so many great pieces written for flute that use extended techniques. And at times, historically, when flutists were composing, like Bricialdi, Boehm, Taffanel, they were writing music that represented the sounds that they were surrounded by. Opera, arias, folk tunes. We now have composers who are also flutists who are still creating music that represent the sounds of our times. And these flutist composers are actually picking up the instrument, and because they're so familiar with the instrument, they're like, yeah, so what happens if I blow into this tube and wiggle my fingers and add some tongue clicks? And if I want to create a piece that represents thunder, or if I want to create a piece that sort of represents water moving, can I use those sounds? Some of these flutists who are composers include Robert Aiken, Robert Dick, Will Offermans, Ian Clark, Nicole Chamberlain, Valerie Coleman, the list goes on. So these composers are not only composing pieces that are actually comfortable and sit well under the fingers or work well in terms of sound creation, but they're performing their works, and those works are being heard and those works are being taught, and now we have like a whole new historical arena that we are in where extended techniques are becoming more mainstream and more a part of our musical language. Okay, so back to the question. In what way can using extended techniques in modern flute music help our playing overall? And I'm going to jump in now and add the second question, which is how can learning new styles help your playing ability? Well, let's take a look first at the mindsets required for learning these extended techniques and other styles of music. And you answer the question for yourself. How can these mindsets help my playing and help me as a musician? First, well, learning extended techniques might require courage. And if you are courageous and you push through that, it will lead to growth. It will lead to a feeling of accomplishment. It will lead to success. So go for it. Secondly, learning extended techniques requires a willingness to explore, a willingness to problem solve, a willingness to kind of deal with the unknown and some frustrations. Basically, so many of these techniques are not standard in terms of how they are performed from performer to performer. They're not always set in stone. The descriptions are not always clear. The notation is not always standardized. So you really need to be able to workshop it. You need to be willing to problem solve. You have to stay flexible and you have to stay patient. Okay, it says to slide your right hand fingers to the rims of the keys. Where are the rims of my keys? Additionally, it requires a willingness to set down or set aside what you may have learned so far. And this includes not only approaches to flute playing, but even repertoire that you've been committed to. Well, my favorite teacher told me to always keep my chin up when I play. In at least 6 international flute master classes that I've attended, I've heard that proper flute technique involves close finger proximity and a light touch. The perfect flute onset is a clear, sparkling, and precise one, executed by the most dynamically engaged muscles of the anterior abdominal wall. So engaging in the energies of discovery, curiosity, flexibility, and courage strengthens these energies in your playing, strengthens these energies in your approach to artistry and performance. Here are some other ways that learning extended techniques or other kinds of music, in this case contemporary music, can assist you in becoming a better performer. Number one, there's a high probability that if you're learning contemporary music or music that's being written like right now, you will have the opportunity to work with a living composer. This gives you a chance to collaborate with them, ask them questions about how they write music, learn about compositional elements, learn about the piece you're working on, and in turn, you can assist them in understanding what sounds are possible on the flute. You can even collaborate with them on making the piece more interesting by adding extended techniques that you invent or that you explore together, and then devising some notation and clarifying the type of description for the technique that would be most helpful for other artists. I often wonder if Reineke and I were alive at the same time, how might he have integrated some of the extended techniques that we now use in music, like wind sounds and watery sounds, and the sounds of little clicking that could so easily exemplify the knight on his horse. These would have been amazing sounds for him to implement in the Undine Sonata. Exploring techniques on the flute also helps you understand the physics of the instrument. So for example, if you're learning how to do microtonal scales, you might suddenly discover that actually an E that's slightly sharp could be an E with a finger that's like vented like this. And suddenly the physics of the instrument start to make sense. Oh, if I have these two keys down, but I vent this finger, that's slightly sharper. Does that mean that if I vent this finger, that's slightly sharper? And in most cases, yes. So you're developing a greater understanding of your instrument. Exploring extended techniques and new music can really liberate you. All of this open-mindedness, all of this discovery, all of this sort of flexibility in learning really affects the way you see standard music when you return to it. Working with extended techniques and new music also gives you opportunity to integrate other art forms. So you could integrate movement with the piece that you're working on. You can create a video, or you can have somebody else create a video with abstract digitized colors. You can have an actor who comes out on stage and speaks the text that these pieces are based off of or that are integrated into the sounds of the piece. How about just standard development in terms of your technique as a flutist? You know, some of these extended techniques are very hard to execute. Some of the multiphonics played at triple piano, for example, require incredible control of the embouchure and incredible control of your use of air. Singing and playing, for example, can get you really in touch with the oral cavity and other resonant structures. It can get you really in touch with the control of the airstream, and it can improve your tone in standard flute playing techniques. Another great benefit to expanding your repertoire and learning new music and developing extended techniques is that it gives you access to pieces that actually are amazing palate cleansers for programming. So for example, if you start a program off with the Prokofiev Sonata and you have 25 minutes of music that's pretty much monochromatic, all in the same style, wonderful to listen to, exciting musically and technically, it's probably a great idea to switch that up for the listener and also for you as a performer with a piece that might just be 5 minutes long and use a completely different color spectrum, completely different textures, and maybe even be not monochromatic, but very colorful as well as different and distinct, because perhaps it's a solo piece or it's a piece that uses silence in a very interesting way. And along those lines, if you become more versatile on your instrument, you are becoming more virtuosic on your instrument. So while virtuosity can definitely and still definitely entails the ability to execute technique in an amazing way and have a great sound and be able to play standard repertoire that's difficult with ease and beauty, the ability to expand your technique and repertoire into other techniques and genres really amplify your virtuosity. One of the ways that developing the language of extended techniques has helped me most is in expanding my understanding of color, expanding my understanding of texture. I've found that when returning to works that are standard rep works, I have been more eager to look for opportunities to actually insert certain colors or expand the color of the piece. There are sections in the Carmen Fantasy by Born, for example, where I love to really push the envelope in terms of color. So for example, where maybe a traditional, beautiful, clear flute sound with a shimmering vibrato and a good core might just sound so gorgeous, I might opt to go in the direction of a dark, hollow, cello-like sound to give more variety to the piece. And because the piece is, say, 10 minutes long and most of it you can actually use beautiful standard flute playing sound in. There are sections in Je l'avais Chantelinos where I really push the envelope, where I move into like a smoky, foggy, amorphic flute sound and then take that sound and make it evolve, make it become more clear, make it become more saturated, more distinct, and maybe heading more in the direction of a traditional good flute sound. My experience with new music, my experience with extended techniques has helped me see music in a different way. It's helped me understand how composers think, how they manipulate sound, how they manipulate silence, how they create concepts and tease their ideas out through sound. And finally, while there are probably many more reasons for how learning extended techniques and other styles of music really help our flute playing, I would say that one of the most delightful ways is that when you return to standard flute repertoire, everything seems so much more simplistic. I don't mean easy, I don't mean simple in the easy sense, but simplistic. I mean, you just have notes on a staff, you've got a lot of patterns that are just regular finger patterns. You've learned all your fingerings for all the 12 notes plus 3 octaves on the instrument, and you don't need to spend time on learning new techniques or on trying to figure out what it is that the composer wants you to be doing. Yeah, so basically regular flute music after doing all that other stuff is kind of like a walk in the park. And now back to the question of not just extended techniques, but how learning other styles of music affects our flute playing. Learning other styles of music basically has the same effect. For example, if you're mastering your ability to play Baroque music, you really need to learn how to taper a note and taper it quickly And that is extremely difficult. That is a technique that serves you not only in your performance of Baroque music, but actually is a technique that is used in contemporary music in pieces that utilize extended techniques. It's a difficult technique, and it's a technique that demands mastery. Stylistic approaches to the appropriate use of vibrato in all genres of music is another similar topic. Our use of vibrato or no vibrato in the Baroque era, in the classical era, how we use vibrato in early 20th century French conservatory music all demand mastery. They demand ear training. They demand an understanding for what style of vibrato you would want to use for each genre. And in turn, all of this, the development of that technique, as well as its application, the way your ear has been developing, your understanding, all of this comes together to make you be the most amazing musician and the most versatile and virtuosic flutist. So I hope that what you walk away with from today's session is, first of all, an understanding that extended techniques are just flute techniques. And if you're going to be a flutist, if you're going to be an amazing flutist, if you're going to be a versatile artist, you need to dig right in and get started. I don't personally recommend the linear approach where you get all your fundamentals in order and then eventually you learn these techniques. I recommend starting as soon as possible, jumping right in, no matter what stage of the game you're in, exploring, having fun, keeping it exciting, and utilizing all the opportunities that are out there right now for us to be enjoying music that is being written by composers who know what they're doing on the flute and who are using these sounds to create really fun pieces to play and pieces that audiences absolutely love. I also hope that you walk away with curiosity about these techniques and inspiration in terms of using them and discovering what the flute can do. Finally, if these techniques are something you're curious about and interested in learning, you can always reach out to me for lessons. I offer online lessons, I offer in-person lessons, and please be sure to check out the program books at Flute Society events and conferences because I might be there giving a workshop on this very topic.